Hello and welcome to the EntreprenHer Show. I am Heidi Richards Mooney. I'm founder of Women in E-Commerce, publisher of We Magazine for Women, and host of today's show. Today's interview is with Hana Abaza. Let me tell you about her. Hana is the Director of Marketing for Shopify Plus, the division of Shopify focused on the world's largest and fastest growing brands, including AllBirds, Fashion Nova, Rebecca Minkoff, Kylie Cosmetics, and thousands more. Prior to joining Shopify, Hana led marketing and growth in a variety of industries with a proven track record for scaling teams, revenue, and customers. And you're going to learn a lot more about what she does and why she does it. Welcome, Hana.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that you're with us. And thank you for taking the time to schedule this, because I know as busy as you must be these days, because everybody's shopping online, right? I read an interesting statistic that in the last 2 months, we've done growth that more than the last 10 years of shopping online. So that's fascinating to me. And of course, Shopify is an important element of that. So tell us about Shopify. Tell us what it does, what attracted you to the position you hold there, etc.
Yeah. I mean, happy to. Stop me if I end up waxing poetic for too long. Some of your listeners may or may not be familiar with Shopify. I think when a lot of people hear about Shopify, they think it's sort of an e-commerce platform, which is a huge portion of what we do. So we enable businesses, really, really small ones and first-time entrepreneurs, all the way to big businesses like some of the ones you mentioned that we work with on Plus, to actually start to create online stores, to manage e-commerce online, to sell online, like so many people are doing these days, especially during the pandemic. Over the years, we've really started to grow sort of how we do that and how we think about commerce. Selling online is one piece of it, but how do you actually sell online and integrate that with social media and leverage other channels to sell the products from your business? How do you actually start to think about selling offline as well? So, that's an area that we've really invested in terms of physical retail and POS. So we are in the business of really making commerce better for everyone, whether it's online or offline. That was really one of the things that attracted me to Shopify, because fundamentally, the way you do that is by enabling small business and by enabling more entrepreneurs. And one of the things we really talk about is, flattening the curve for entrepreneurship and really making it easy for anyone to start a business, start an online store. And that's really at the heart of what Shopify does. And, this was something that was true, a year ago, 4 years ago when I joined, but it is especially true and especially important right now.
Wow, and I totally agree with you. And I just learned something, because I didn't know it was more than just an e-commerce platform. So I hope we get into that a little bit more. But
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your responsibility as the Director of Marketing. What do you do?
Absolutely. So I'll step back a little bit and I'll talk about sort of Shopify Plus and what that is. And then happy to share sort of my day-to-day job and what Director of Marketing actually means. Going back a little bit in time when Shopify initially started, and at this point, I think that's about 15 years ago or so now. Shopify was really focused on small businesses and those, first-time entrepreneurs and helping them get online. For those of you that may have followed Shopify, you know that Shopify grew really big, really fast by focusing on that customer group. Now, a really interesting thing happened as Shopify started to grow really big, really fast. Those customers that were using Shopify, some of them also started to grow really big, really fast. And they weren't small businesses anymore. They were now really significant businesses doing, tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars online using Shopify. So one of two things would happen when, what started off as those small businesses started to become those bigger business. They would either sort of churn from Shopify and they would go to like an enterprise e-commerce platform. And I think, many of us are familiar with sort of enterprise software and all that entails. Or, and this was the really interesting piece, some of them would just figure out a way to make it work on Shopify. And that actually was really the beginning kernels of what Shopify Plus ultimately is. What we were trying to do is we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we actually create the product, the service, the offer that these merchants need to help keep them on Shopify longer? What is it that we can do to help enable them scale their business to that next level? And that's where Shopify Plus was really born. And Shopify Plus is, I think, about 5 years old right now. And I think the really interesting thing with Shopify Plus is it was a little bit of a rinse and repeat of Shopify. As soon as we started to see, okay, hey, there's something we can do to help these merchants that have grown and scaled, Shopify Plus started focusing on that customer group and also started growing really big, really fast. And the most interesting part, Heidi, is not only did we start to see these merchants that were already on Shopify upgrade to Shopify Plus because they were growing and they needed more from us, they needed more product, more services, more support. We also started seeing these customers that had gone over to these enterprise solutions actually come back to Shopify, because now Shopify had a solution that was good for mid-market. It was starting to really build it out so it really fit that customer group. And that opened up our eyes to, hey, there's a bit of a white space over here. You have all of these very enterprisey software solutions that, quite frankly, are very legacy, very clunky, very costly, and don't always deliver the value that they should be given the cost. And that just made us look at Shopify Plus in a totally different way. We realized that this is ultimately a bigger opportunity to help merchants than we thought. So since then, Shopify Plus has been growing, has been working with more and more bigger brands, more and more bigger merchants. And what we really realized is this thread of entrepreneurship that's so baked into Shopify's DNA actually really exists up market as well. And that's been the most interesting part, is discovering that, oh, actually, this is just a different kind of entrepreneurship. All the way from, the AllBirds of the world that are sort of founded and scaled into these really big numbers really quickly. But what we have realized over the years is there are entrepreneurs sitting in like big global companies. And it's incredible to talk to them because they are actually almost fighting their own battle within their company to actually bring it into sort of the future and into online and into e-commerce and really keeping up with what consumers are demanding. So I'm gonna pause there because I feel like I've been rambling for a while.
No,
ultimately, that's what we do.
So tell us some of the things that Shopify offers, and
Sure.
Well, how does it differ from other similar platforms?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think it's a bit challenging to answer, so I'll try and break it down a little bit. The really unique thing with Shopify, and one of the things that really attracted me to it, is we really are looking at this full spectrum of merchants and customers and entrepreneurs. And as you can imagine, the platform and the tooling and the products that we build for a first-time entrepreneur are going to be different than what we're building and creating for, these bigger, more enterprisey brands, right? And I think at the end of the day, what we try and make sure that we're doing is really offering a platform that helps them enable the core of their business, right? So when we look across Shopify and some of the things that we do, I mean, e-commerce obviously is a big part of it. I think if you're looking at Shopify's platform in comparison to some of those sort of enterprise software solutions that I mentioned. There are some real advantages to using Shopify, including speed of execution, flexibility, and really enabling teams to work very rapidly on Shopify, to be able to execute on what it is that they need to execute, to be able to integrate with all of their other systems when they become sort of these bigger companies. And I think like that is going to be key for brands moving forward, especially ones that find themselves in a position where they have to accelerate their plans for, quote, digital transformation, right? It was fascinating to watch post-COVID and really, have conversations with those bigger brands, because the ones that were digitally native and that had already figured out the online piece, they were at a huge advantage. Whereas a lot of these legacy retailers that hadn't yet done that were not only at a complete disadvantage, because now they're rethinking their entire business model. So anywhere from, legacy retailers that have predominantly physical locations and don't really have an online presence. There's a lot of those, even CPGs who rely mostly on distribution channels and wholesale type models. They were fundamentally rethinking their entire business model, and they had just their sales had plummeted, literally, because people physically could not go into the stores. Compare that with these D2C brands that we have on Shopify, and what they were focused on after the pandemic and after the lockdown was adjusting their marketing, adjusting their messaging, contributing to the community. How do we make masks? How do we diversify our products so we can actually supply frontline workers? So they were in a very different position. They were, number one, not worried about their business model. Number two, they were also in a position to actually help and give back and figure out what they could do. So on that end of the market, I think that is a very clear sort of delineation. I think as you start to talk about smaller businesses and entrepreneurs, I mean, Shopify is so easy to get up and running for entrepreneurs, and that is deliberate. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to go start your Shopify store tomorrow and start selling and start getting your products up there. And I think, beyond the e-commerce piece and beyond enabling entrepreneurship, we also provide capital and financing. So Shopify Capital has, and I should send you the numbers because I'm blanking on them right now, but we fund entrepreneurs. We fund these merchants and these stores because we believe in entrepreneurship and we believe that they should have access to capital. We, as mentioned, we also do POS and physical retail, and that conversation is a really interesting one right now because even before the pandemic, there was this rhetoric of oh, retail is dying. And then on the flip side, a lot of people were saying, long live retail. The reality is retail has been changing for a really long time.
Yes.
The pandemic accelerated that change. And there will always be some kind of physical retail, but it's going to look very different. So we're thinking about, what is the tooling and the technology that we need to build to create that? We have a great POS system. What else do we need to do? AR, VR is another big part of it. And how do we actually start to upgrade the technology in sort of the world that we're in? So, there is no shortage of things we're working on. I mean, I could go on and on. Shopify Fulfillment Network is a whole other one that speaks to shipping and logistics. But I think, at the end of the day, our goal is to enable entrepreneurship.
Okay. So if you had to describe Shopify to someone who never heard of it before and was considering, had never, and didn't even have an online presence, but wanted to start a store, what would you say to them?
Honestly, I would say head over to shopify.com, not to make this an ad. And you'll find everything you need there. I think gone are the days where you have to hire developers and designers to make a website and, set something up online. I think, Shopify allows you to do that really easily. And you can do it yourself. You don't need to be technical to do it. We give you templates, we give you themes, we give you everything that you need in order to do it. And the great part with Shopify is we're not going to take over your brand. This is about you. We let you create your identity, your website. So if we were to compare this with like a marketplace, for example, like an Etsy or an Amazon or, some of these other marketplaces that are super helpful and I think powerful, and it can be a great sales channel. This isn't the same thing. This is about you, the entrepreneur. This is about you, the brand. We'll power everything for you on the back end. We'll give you the tools to make it happen. But ultimately, this is about the merchant.
And a lot of those other platforms are integrate nicely in terms of some people. I have clients who use all three because they sell handmade goods, they have a website, and they also want to sell their higher end things on Amazon and some of the other platforms. So I think that the fact that you can integrate a lot of the things that you do with all of these other things makes it very attractive to a business owner. So what is the most interesting or inspiring thing that has happened to you since you've been with Shopify Plus?
That is quite the question.
You want to think about it and come back to it? I know it's an on the spot.
I mean, so I do have an answer. I think I'm not sure. I'd have to really think on whether it is the most inspiring. I think it's the most recent and it's quite inspiring, but there may be a bit of a recency effect here. I think the way, so I think two things. So I think the way Shopify as a company and our leadership and our executive team and all of the teams reacted and pivoted in the face of COVID, to me, just made me so incredibly happy and excited and grateful to be working at that type of a company. I mean, I think we realized really early on, and our leadership realized really early on, that we are at a point where Shopify is so important to people's livelihoods, right? Whether or not you are a small, farmer, and we've literally had these specific examples. We had a small farm that was in, I think, rural Ontario. I'd have to check and see where. I used a snippet of their recording in a presentation I gave to WPO, actually. And they called in and they had set up a Shopify store and they had never had an online presence, but that was literally the only way they could keep their business running post-COVID. All the way to these sort of other brands that are providing essential goods and really trying to get people online. So we deleted all our plans.
Right?
Literally. And I'm
millions of others.
Absolutely. And I'm quoting our CEO when I say, he said, delete all plans. The world needs us to do this other thing right now and to focus on these areas. So let's figure out what we need to do. So that was, I think, a pretty inspiring moment. I think, I'm also inspired every day by our merchants, our customers, our teams. It is a very unique and I think special place to be.
So what do you like most about your role with Shopify? Sounds like you've already said it, but go ahead and say it again.
What do I like most about my role at Shopify? Well, it is always a challenge. It's always interesting. It's never boring. I don't think I've ever been bored for a day in my life at Shopify. And I think one of the things I like most is I'm also just surrounded by people that are also really in it for the mission and really in it to achieve as much as we can and help as many merchants as we can. And that's not always the case with every company, right?
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot now. So if you could wave a magic wand, what would be the one thing you'd like to change or improve or just make different today or tomorrow?
Yeah. So many things come to mind. And here's why. I think Shopify has grown so quickly. so incredibly quickly since the time I've been here, which is 4 years, but since its inception, it's grown incredibly quickly. And when I say has grown quickly, I mean in terms of customers, I mean in terms of revenue, and also in terms of employees at Shopify. So I started at Shopify approximately 4 years ago. I think we have maybe it might be around 6,000 or so employees. It might be more than that at this point.
Wow.
85% of them started after me. Actually, I think almost 90% of them started after me.
Wow.
So like when you grow a company that quickly and like bring on all these people, it puts a lot of like operational stress, right? It's really hard to keep up in terms of like process and systems and operations. So I think that's something that we're constantly chasing, is like continuing to build out those foundations to help enable all of these great teams. But that's really, really tricky. So really trying to figure out how do we keep up operationally with this like scale of growth, which is challenging for I think everybody.
Oh, absolutely. So if you had to give one piece of advice about marketing, what would that be?
Yeah, I think what I would actually say is marketing doesn't matter without really, really great positioning and really great and really well understood, product market fit, for lack of a better term. And I think that's the piece that actually people gloss over. So then when you get to the marketing part, it feels like you're pushing a boulder uphill, because no matter how great your marketing is, if you don't have those foundations, you're always going to feel like marketing is a battle and you're pushing it uphill. And what that ultimately comes down to is really intimately knowing your customer, knowing your audience, knowing what problems you're solving for them, and knowing how to articulate that and position that within the context surrounding your business or your product, right? And I think, what I mean by that is like if you're selling, muffins or like whatever the thing is, like really understanding, who you're selling to, why they love it, and also understanding, again, the context, like what other options do they have? Like, why will they choose you? All of these really foundational questions that I, more and more over my career as I lead teams and build teams, these are marketing 101 questions. These are even pre-marketing. But the further I get into my career, the more I'm finding all I do in meetings now, whether, here or elsewhere or consulting with companies or, any conversation I'm in, all I'm doing is asking these marketing 101 questions. And most of the time, most of the people actually gloss over them and don't spend the time articulating that. So, I mean, that would be my marketing advice, which is don't even think about marketing until you've nailed down those, basics.
And I absolutely agree with you, because I think so many people not only gloss over, they don't really understand maybe not just the importance of it, but even drilling down enough to know exactly who your target audience is. My goodness, I work with a lot of people who like everybody is their audience. No, it's not. You may be appeal to a lot of people, but you have a specific person or a specific, what they call an avatar, who is going to say, oh, that's the only company for me. Just as Shopify appeals to so many people for the specific things. You early on, especially, worked with small businesses, and so you grew fast because small business were attracted to the ease of use, to the fact that they could get up and running in no time, and that they didn't have to learn all this technical jargon, which is really frustrating. Now, there are people who don't want to ever do it, but the ones who want to do it and want to learn it, I think it's a fascinating platform that has helped so many. So I'm going to switch a little bit. What's the number one software tool or app or whatever that you love, and why?
I'm literally just now looking at like my desktop and my phone, because I feel like there's probably a lot of.
Oh, I'm sure. I have a ton of them. It's a hard question to answer, because it's like, how do you pick just one?
Yeah. No, it's too many of them. Let's see here. So I
Just
think
one
my
you can't live without. You probably have a ton of them you can't live without, but any one that you think that the audience would resonate with would be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
this is so hard. Let's see. I would say, okay, so I'm gonna just throw out a couple there. I have been sort of deep diving on these masterclass sessions. I don't know if you've seen masterclass.com. So I
Oh,
did get the
yes.
app
Love.
installed
Yes.
in my, yeah, and so I got
Masterclass.
the
I'll
app.
put that down. Yeah.
It's amazing because it actually, as much as you can like sign up for them, and I think there's like some fee for like a yearly membership. They're great little courses, but I found I was like it wasn't always front and center, but as soon as I put the app like right on my phone and right in front and center, it was okay, cool. I have half an hour to kill. I'm going to do this. So that's actually been really cool. Audible is another
Oh,
one
yeah.
where
Oh, yeah.
like
Audible.
can't live without it. Oh, and actually probably the one I use more than anything is Overcast. I'm a bit of a podcast junkie, and I would say Overcast is like my go-to app for podcasts. So check
You
that
have,
out if you're also a podcast junkie.
in addition to the new favorite, the EntreprenHer Show, what's some of your favorite shows?
Uh, okay, I go through spurts. I tend to binge podcasts. So one of my always favorites is The Knowledge Project, with Shane Parrish. It's interview style, which tends to be the thing that I like most, but I have always been a big fan of Shane and his blog and his podcast. I think another one that I really like is Reply All, super popular, but worth a mention. I've also been getting really into podcasts of a lot of comedians lately. So Whitney Cummings has a podcast called Good For You. I actually am really enjoying it and have been listening to a bunch of episodes. I mean, Joe Rogan is also one that like I never got into at first, but like lately have been getting into. Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. I'm gonna stop now, but like those
Okay,
are
that's
the
enough.
ones that are on
I
rotation.
can't write that fast. But this is good because it shows the diversity of you as a human being, that you don't just, I tended to listen to marketing podcasts for the longest time. And then I realized I knew all this stuff already. It was just kind of refreshing
Totally.
my mind. But it was nice. It's nice to break up the day, and it also,
Yeah.
I think it helps you with your creativity when you're not listening to all the same things over and over.
Yeah, actually, it's
So,
interesting that you say that because one of the questions I get a lot is like, oh, what marketing books do you recommend, or what marketing podcasts do you recommend? And I kind of have two answers to that. The one that I will say, depending on the scenario, I will probably tell people to watch, which I think relates to our conversation earlier about like understanding who your customer is A Thousand True Fans. I think that is still holds up as like a good mental model for like knowing who your customer is, particularly if you're starting a business, if you're working for yourself, is that mindset of A Thousand True Fans is great. But generally my reply to what marketing book should you read is like none of them. And here's why. I think if you're reading something for utility, like how do I set up like Facebook ads, or whatever the thing is, like sure, yes, read that. Arguably that's not going to be a book, that's going to be like a blog post. So if it's
right.
like utility and it's like how do I do a thing, go for it, find the thing that you need and just like read that. I think ultimately though, most marketing books are, to your point, going to be really repetitive. They're going to talk about the same thing in a slightly different format, in a slightly different framework. I think read business books, read leadership books. One of my favorite leadership books is Multipliers. And this is like a hugely undervalued skill in my opinion, read like the old copywriting books from like the 60s and 70s. Those are gold, not just for copywriting, but for like marketing in general. There's a great book called Ogilvy Unpublished. which is a compilation of random things that David Ogilvy wrote. And sometimes they're like internal memos, sometimes they're ads, sometimes they're manuals. And it's like such an interesting read. And it also, like, a lot of the lessons that like you pick up through this book, I'm like, yes, this is applicable to like B2B sales, right? So that's my like rant on marketing books.
Well, I love that because, you know, you think about some of the older books, they're so evergreen because some things never change. You know,
Yes.
human nature doesn't really change. So it's good to look back as well as looking forward, I think is so important. So let's talk about where you see yourself in 5 years. Writing a book, starting a podcast. No, go ahead. I'm kidding.
I'm going to write a marketing book and then tell people not to read it. That's going to be what I do, is I will write a book and tell people not to read it. Where do I see myself in 5 years? You know, I don't know. I've never been one for sort of long-term planning like that. I think, you know, interestingly, I would not be surprised if I was still at Shopify doing something completely different. I think time will tell, but, you know, for me, my sort of guiding posts are, you know, what do I want to optimize for? I want to optimize for learning, and I want to make an impact in a really sort of meaningful and explosive way, sort of on the world. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm at Shopify. I learn something every single day, and I genuinely believe we're making such an incredible impact. So, you know, those are my guiding posts. So wherever that lands me in 5 years.
Excellent. So what's the number one thing you would like our listeners to take away from today's show?
Yeah, I think, you know, especially now, regardless of sort of what you're doing, what your work is, where you're working on, where you're focusing your time and attention, I think there is a lot of value and power in having sort of that sense of independence that comes from being an entrepreneur. And that may not mean starting a business tomorrow. That could mean something different for you. But it is something that's really important, I think, for the soul, for every individual to have like their corner of the world. So I would say find that thing that's yours. And maybe that is becoming an entrepreneur and working on something that you love, and maybe it's something else.
Excellent. Well, Hana, thank you so much for being with us today. Tell us how our listeners can get in touch or connect with you.
Sure. I'm not that hard to find online. I think you can Google me and a bunch of places come up. The socials are great. Twitter, Hana Abaza, my name straight through. You can find me on essentially any of the socials. I feel like if you look hard enough, if you Google my name, you can probably find an email address. So for those of you that are eager beavers, go for it.
You got it. Well, I want to thank you, Hana, for being with us today. And I would like to thank our listeners for listening to the EntreprenHer Show with Hana Abaza, the Director of Marketing with Shopify Plus. To learn more about upcoming events and to listen to past interviews of amazing women, visit the EntreprenHerShow.com. And of course, to learn more about women in e-commerce, visit wecai.org. Thank you for being with us today.